Okay, welcome back to the last part of our demo
All right.
about VS Code running as a replacement to the Web IDE. This might be more of a discussion because I didn't prompt you with anything here for the proof of concept. This is something that we've talked about, though, about VS Code. Um, Generally speaking, the impression was that it is a little less flexible when compared to our current Web IDE, and that we don't have as much control over the UI, the button placement, the line height, the way things work, the MR creation flow, the commit flow, things like that. But I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about ways we can extend VS Code running on the web and potential that we could explore down the road.
Yeah. Um, so talking about some of the interesting things we would want to um, that we'd want to do here. So I'm just going to open up a markdown file to show how things like open preview to the side, VS Code, this isn't like a baked in feature. VS Code provides a really robust extension API that lets us hook into this kind of behavior. So like what we'd see here on the right is a web view, and WebView is gonna receive things from the file system, because as I make changes here and actually make changes here, we see it actually change and be updated. And very similarly, it'd be really cool to have a more lovable live preview like feature here, or if we wanted to implement our own uh, WYSIWYG content editor
Mhm.
here, um, those things would be doable. Uh, and so VS Code has a fantastic guide for all the capabilities that extensions have, and then some. One of the really cool ones we were just talking about is WebView. Um, and I was trying to find an example for this, but it is basically a view that can render almost any HTML content. But some of the examples they use for like an editor for, or maybe it's custom editors. That's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah. So you can also create like custom editors. That's the one that we would do for content editor. But some examples are like um, things that demo shaders or like 3D models, and
Mhm.
so this the API that VS Code provides is robust enough to basically put anything in the face of this this kind of editor.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, we do, by the way, just not to interrupt, but we do have a fair few customers that work on like games or lots of large binary files that they might
yeah,
appreciate the ability to render those live in the browser and open up the Web IDE to interact with them.
and what's cool too is if we are able to hook in, being running VS Code, we also can hook into the VS Code marketplace. So if we can run extensions that already provide those kind of editors, we don't have to remake those or anything like that. And so we have a whole host of lovable editing features that are already being used in the wild that are quite possible for us to use out of the box over here. We saw in part two that there's a little bit of hiccups we need to solve with the extension marketplace, but the VS Code extensions API is all there and works the same on the web as it does on locally, as long as you're not running like actual terminal commands and stuff, which extensions providing custom editors wouldn't. Uh,
Mhm.
that's a good point. Um, there's something else I was gonna say about uh, the extensibility. Oh, like there's also there's APIs for um, we can actually create a terminal. So if we want to move forward to doing actual sort of cloud compute where we're running tests or whatever, um, there's APIs for how you would hook this UI into that. Um, there are also APIs. The API for source control is very robust too. It's not necessarily tied to Git, because think about VS Code also sometimes want to support things like Subversion or whatever. So if we want to have a very Git strict, changes staged split of files like we used to have in the Web IDE, we can implement that, or we can have it simple like our current Web IDE is, where we just keep track of all changes. And if you don't want to change, you don't need it. So their source control functionality is quite extensible too. I show that you can change the coloring of things. That's probably the easiest thing we can change, is like the color, font, text, a little bit of the look and feel. We can't quite change some of their like marketplace, like their baked in icons. They actually do provide like an API where you could provide some set of those, but they don't talk about it a whole lot. But
yeah, I think there's two types of themes. There's an icon pack theme, and there's a like color theme, and you can use them in conjunction.
Right. There's one other thing. Yes. So it's talking about the UI. As far as the UI goes, things that we can adjust very easily are things on the status bar. We can add these little boxes, which they call tree views, but they don't necessarily have to be a tree of things. So for example, I added one here called commit changes, where like, oh, if you're done with your changes, hit the commit button and it'll just take you to here. Because we kind of have a similar button in the current Web IDE saying, hey, commit, be done. We can also add our own little tabs and windows and stuff as well. From as a UI perspective, this is the easiest stuff to change. It's definitely not all the things we can change. There's some things we might be able to tweak from that. But a lot of the UI you're not gonna be able to leave this look and feel too much, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it's kind of the UI everyone's used to.
Let's see. The other thing you talked about on the last demo was like the ability to potentially go outside of it and communicate through the API for things like a merge request flow or something like that, or in a modal or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's a good point too. There is I'm trying to see if I could find one. I can't think of a way to demo this necessarily, but they do have they call it quick pick. This kind of like drop down where you open up this, where I'm typing in things and doing commands. They use this kind of drop down to actually support a number of like form fields. So if you have like a step-by-step process a user needs to go through, like our workflow extension has enter your GitLab token and like, what branch do you want to connect to, and we'll ask a list like 2 or 3 questions for here. So for our like merge request workflow on commit, we could ask, do you want to commit to your branch you've selected, or do you want to commit to a new branch? Do you want to open up a new MR or not? Some of the workflows, VS Code has a baked in style of doing that kind of like form flow that looks like this kind of drop down thing where there's like baked in asking you a question and different kinds of inputs based on the type of value you're expecting. So that's a really nice feature. But we could also open up, you notice like we're still have the main GitLab top nav here. So we're still inside of GitLab. Everything inside of here is technically inside of an iframe running VS Code, but there's still communication outside of it. So if we wanted to open up like a modal, like I want to set my status, that's all doable too.
Cool. Yeah.
So that's all game. Doing things on top of all this for sure.
The last bit on customization, I just wanted to ask, I think we touched on this a little bit in our longer demo, but the idea that these settings, I can't even remember which part of this 4 separate calls that we're definitely recording at separate times when we demoed this, but you showed that the settings persist for like themes and stuff. But the idea that you could have at a project or group or instance level, a standard editor config that gets pre-installed and it references from a file that kind of sets a baseline where obviously the user could override very easily. But an organization may have particular settings they want to encourage or extensions they want installed. So I know that interfacing with editor config and being more customizable like that is something that's on the Web IDE backlog. So I guess I wanted to just prompt that this approach also enables us to have like a standard config, maybe even across projects.
Yeah. So like talking about project specific configuration, like baked out of it, VS Code will look for VS Code .VS Code directories. I haven't tried a project like this on the web build, so it's worth that's worth testing out. But that code is there and it's doing something. But definitely a lot of the editor settings, like you see here, like what spaces am I at and what kind of based on the file type and stuff, these are all can be workspace configurations or global configurations that are shared. But it'd be interesting to, and it's stuff that we can set on Bootstrap too. So if there was we wanted to have this setting be some sort of GitLab setting that's not necessarily baked into the repository, we can set those settings here too.
Fantastic. Well, we're well over time. I don't need to keep you. Thank you for running through this, and for everybody watching at home. Let us know if you have any more questions about VS Code. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, appreciate it.